Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on Egypt's health file that's within the efforts of the Egyptian government to inoculate all the Egyptian citizens, bracing for a fourth wave of the coronavirus pandemic. We're going to be looking at the prospects of these inoculations, the fourth wave, the vaccination, everything that we need to talk about regarding the coronavirus pandemic here in Egypt. But before we start doing that, let's take a closer look on some of the main stories making the headlines today. And we'll start off with President Abdel al-Sisi directing today that the internal architectural and artistic designs of the upper and lower houses of parliament at the new administrative capital reflect Egypt's civilizational heritage and its constitutional role as one of the main pillars of the state. This came during the President's meeting with Major General Amir Said Ahmed, the Presidential Advisor for Urban Planning, and Major General Ihab al-Far, the head of the Armed Forces Engineering Authority, as well as the General Amgad Ramadan, head of the Advisory Office of the Engineering Authority. Presidential spokesman Bassam Radi said the meeting addressed the follow-up to the construction and engineering position of a number of the Republic-wide geometric body projects in the city. The meeting tackled the executive position of a number of establishments in the new administrative capital, especially regarding the engineering designs and the diverse artworks. It also witnessed a review of the efforts to benefit from untapped space lands in some areas of Cairo, as well as the executive position of the Egyptian Walk project, as well as the developments of the New Delta project, along with a Daba axis aimed at creating an integrated agricultural and industrial society, increasing the agricultural patch, bridging the food gap and offering more job opportunities. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli also witnessed the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between Egypt and the German company Siemens today. The signing of the MOU came during the Premier's meeting with the Chief Executive of the company and Minister of Electricity and Renewable Energy, Mohammed Shakir, which centered on developing the green hydrogen energy in Egypt. Madbouli assured that this agreement would enhance joint relations between Egypt and the company, especially as green hydrogen represents the future of energy. The Prime Minister noted that Egypt has a plan to develop this industry in line with the European Union's undergoing development programs. For his part, the German official praised the Egyptian-German partnership in the green hydrogen field. Tuesday's agreement was signed within the framework of implementing the state strategy to expand the green energy field and benefit from Egypt's wealth. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry signed today a number of cooperation agreements with the Sierra Leone's counterpart, David J. Francis, within the framework of enhancing bilateral relations. The signing took place on the sidelines of a session of consultations held by the top diplomats in the presence of delegations from both countries. Talks between the two ministers also focused on means to strengthen the relations and other issues of mutual concern. And upon the directives of President Abdel al-Sisi to bring back the Egyptian citizens from Afghanistan, a military plane carrying Egyptians arrived in the country today. The jet, also carrying Al-Azhar delegates and Egyptian embassy staff, landed at the airport amid coronavirus precautionary measures and the highest security levels. The citizens praised the efforts by President al-Sisi to bring them home safely. These were some of the main stories making the news today, but now turning our attention to our topic in hand. According to the Health Minister Hala Zaid, 15 million doses of the locally manufactured Sinovac vaccine have been distributed to medical centers around Egypt. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
The Minister of Health and Population, Dr. Hela Zayed, said more than 15 million doses of the locally manufactured Sinovac vaccination will be distributed to medical centers all over the country starting Tuesday, adding that all vaccines were proven to be effective against the Delta Plus variant. During a press conference, the minister noted that the Delta Plus variant for COVID-19 was not proven to be the most severe. However, it is the fastest spreading and most contagious. According to the minister, the locally manufactured vaccine reduces the rate of hospitalization of patients by 90%. Zayed said Egypt will receive 5.2 million doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines next month. She said one case for Delta Plus variant had been detected in Egypt last July for a woman with mild symptoms that did not require any hospitalization or special medical care. She added the ministry plans to vaccinate over 3.2 million people in universities and 2 million in schools before the beginning of the new year. This includes teaching staff, administrative personnel, workers, security personnel, as well as university students. She noted that the school personnel will receive the 2 vaccine doses in August and September. The minister said they will register on the Health Ministry's vaccination website under a new category, noting that they will receive an SMS within 72 hours to get the vaccine. The minister said the coronavirus cases among the medical staff have significantly decreased, affirming that around 700,000 medical workers have been vaccinated, representing more than 95% of the sector. Zayed said the country aims to administer the 2 vaccine shots to the largest possible number of citizens, especially as the country expects a rise in infections by the second half of September. Zayed noted all medical staff and public sector workers will have to take the vaccine before the beginning of October, as per the cabinet's directives. Egypt plans to produce millions of Sinovac and Russian Sputnik V vaccine doses annually to cover local and African needs. Early in July, Zayed said the ministry seeks to produce 80 million vaccine shots this year. She noted that large vaccination centers in several areas around the country have been set up and are capable of vaccinating up to 60,000 citizens per day.
مش هتتحل إلا بإرادة المصريين والعمل 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 والصبر. وأؤكد أنني على يقين من قدرة عمال مصر على استكمال مسيرة التنمية التي لن تكتمل إلا بعزيمتهم ووطنيتهم الصادقة.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off our discussion, let me welcome my distinguished guest, Dr. Ahmed Abdel Hafeez, the Professor of Chest Diseases and especially the Pulmonology at Cairo University and Head of the Pulmonary Unit at Manuel Specialized University Hospital. Dr. Abdel Hafeez, thank you very much for joining us.
It was very nice to meet you and our selected audiences.
Pleasure, sir. Doctor, before we start talking about the governmental efforts regarding the inoculation of the Egyptian citizens for the vaccines against the coronavirus, we want a quick update about the status of the pandemic here in Egypt. Now, we're prepping for a fourth wave that observers are saying should be over within a month. Now, what are the characteristics of this fourth wave? Does it include the Delta variant? How present is the Delta variant here in Egypt?
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, we are facing the fourth wave now. We are all preparing our health services for receiving the fourth wave. Actually, let me come behind for a while. The first wave in Egypt started in March 2020. We faced a lot of problems in the start because we have got, as an Egyptian, less experience than the other countries where the COVID starts earlier, like Europe and China, of course. And so then we started to get experience, just like a learning curve all through. And then we faced the second wave in the last winter, starting from September and October 2020. And then we have got a peak, and then the curve was flattened, and then we started to experience the third wave by February 2021. And now we are all starting to receive the fourth wave, which is expected to start in the end of September. I'm not so interested about those waves and the enumeration of the waves because, as we said before many times, COVID is going to be a direct respiratory problem that will be continuous, not only in Egypt but also in all the countries. In the future. It will turn to be like influenza virus, seasonal. Maybe it's going to replace the influenza by a while. And so, counting the waves is not the issue now, but what I want to assure our audiences that those waves are less severe than the first waves. And I'm here mainly concerned with the severity of the disease rather than the distribution or, the number or the frequency of the involved patients. Because once the disease severity is decreasing, this means that we are having, a controlled respiratory tract infection, whether in the upper airway or the lower airways, which means that the health resources can cope with such a disease. We're not going to face a collapse of our health system, for example, or a shortage of beds in the respiratory ICUs or ventilators, because this means that respiratory failure will be less common, and the need for ventilators and healthcare service will be less common, so that we can treat the majority of the cases at home. And I think this would be the attitude of the fourth wave, because the virus is losing a lot of its, severity, a lot of its force, because there are some form of mutations which are usually in the favor of humanity and not the opposite.
And is one of the sort of mutation, does it include the Delta variant? Is it a sort of a mutation of the first COVID-19?
It's one of the mutations, yes. The Minister of Health, Mrs. Hala Zaid, has announced from about 4 to 5 days that we discovered the first cases of Delta viruses by mid-July. But this was just a discovery. But I think it was much earlier than this, probably from May or June, but it was discovered actually by genetic profiling in the mid-July. And of course, that was expected. I mean, usually we are following Europe the wave starts in Europe and then it follows here in Egypt and the Middle East within 2 to 3 months. And since Delta was discovered in Europe at March or April, so it's biologic, it would start in Egypt by June or July. That's the same like she announced. We are not so afraid of the Delta waves as regard the severity, but it's the problem of more transmission. It's much more transmissible, easy transmissible rather than the alpha and the beta forms. Also there is the epsilon. They're talking about the epsilon virus, which is also less severe, but also much more transmissible. Those Delta forms of the virus, I said before that it's less severe. It mainly affects the upper respiratory tract, sometimes the GIT, the gastrointestinal system. Patients experience severe abdominal colics, some forms of diarrhea, vomiting, anorexia. They experience some form of rhinosinusitis with severe nasal congestion, of course, loss of sensation of smell and headaches, severe headaches, and severe fatigability and malaise throughout the whole body. Then comes on the lower respiratory tract symptoms, starting with some sort of cough and shortness of breath, but not so severe like the first and second waves. And then more than 85 to 90% of the cases are self-controlled with self-home isolation, and less than 10% only are the patients who need real hospitalization, whether in the wards or the ICU beds.
And what if people contacted the alpha and the beta, the first and the second wave of COVID, and then the immunity system sort of was able to form some sort of antibodies? Would that make it easier to deal with the Delta variant?
Yeah, that's true. That's really true, because those people who caught the infection earlier on in the first and second waves have got some form of immunity. It's debatable whether this is a solid immunity for life, or it's an immunity which is only transient for months or years. But one of the main important points is that there's some form of cells in the human body which are called the T lymphocytes. And one type of those T lymphocytes is called T memory cells. And by its name, it's memory cell. It recognizes the virus and then it remembers this virus when it tackles the body again. So those memory cells can deal with the virus, in a self-controlled way. The problem of the patients who experience severe bronchopneumonia and severe acute respiratory distress syndrome and hypoxia, those patients with COVID have got a hyperimmune response. Their immune system reacts very strongly, heavily to the virus, and so it doesn't only harm the virus, but they harm their own bodies, their own cells, their own tissues. And that's the point. Those patients are the most prone to developing respiratory failure and most prone to develop to need ICU ventilators, and those have got the most they are most prone to mortality. The highest mortality rates are in those patients. So coming back to your question, those patients who have got the virus before have got those T memory cells that control this form of inflammation. Severe, rapid inflammatory cascade of inflammatory reaction leading to this bronchopneumonia and full destruction of the lung. Those patients are less liable to do so because they have memory cells. They remember the virus. So they act moderately with the virus. They can kill the virus without harming their own bodies. So patients who have got the COVID-19 in the first and second waves are of course less prone to develop COVID again. They are less prone to catch it, and if they catch it, they are less prone to develop complications, lower respiratory tract complications. Yeah, that's true. And that's what we call herd immunity. Because what's the herd immunity? Herd immunity means that more than 70% of the individuals of the population have got an immunity towards the virus, whether this immunity is by an actual infection or by vaccination. I think Egypt is in this era because, whether here in Cairo or even in Delta and Upper Egypt, most of the families, there's at least one member who catch the infection. So we are moving towards this herd immunity, and that's why the severity of the disease here in Egypt is, inshallah, less severe than the first and second waves.
Well, Doctor, during the first and the second wave, people were used to talking about really having to take a lot of fluids, have a lot of fluid intake, really work on having a lot of vitamin C, vitamin D, the zinc, all of these things. Do you think that with the fourth wave and the mutations and the Delta variant, now you're saying that they would be less severe than the first two waves, the Alpha and the Beta? Yes. Would we still want to take all these necessary vitamins, always want to make sure we're drinking a lot of water, a lot of hot drinks, even in the summer?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It's not the hot drinks. Let the hot drinks get aside, but drinking water, this is very important. And having the vitamins is important because, there are some physicians, not only here in Egypt, but even in the USA and Europe, they do underestimate the importance of the vitamins in controlling and avoiding the complication of such a viral disease. We used to learn as physicians from a long time ago how the importance of vitamins in prevention and treatment of viral infection. Generally speaking, not only COVID, even the influenza or any viral adenovirus and others. And this is applicable on COVID. The patients who are on regular vitamin C oral therapy and vitamin D are proved by all scientific ways that they are less prone to catch the disease or develop complications from the disease. And this has got a very important scientific background because vitamin C is it's a very simple drug. It's very cheap. And some people may under-evaluate its importance. But it's very important because it's an antioxidant, it's an anti-inflammatory, and it's an antiviral, even in high doses, because we have in medicine what we call mega-dose vitamin C. In some patients, we give them very high doses of vitamin C, much more, 10 or 20 folds the recommended daily allowance. And such high doses can potentiate the human body immune system to respond accurately towards the virus. Of course, not only the vitamins. In most of the cases, we need other drug regimens and other protocols, and we can tackle this. But the importance of vitamins is that they potentiate such an action. Vitamin D also is an immunomodulator. Vitamin D is also crucial in such conditions because it prevents the inflammatory cascades, the reactions which can lead to respiratory shutdown. Zinc is also important. Drinking water is also important. And if this is applicable in the first and second wave, so surely this is more applicable in the less severe fourth wave because it can prevent the virus from approaching our lungs.
Yes. Well, a lot of scientists, a lot of doctors such as yourself, they're always saying that water is the most important thing. And as you've dismissed the hot drinks, or the fluids.
No. I dismissed the hot drinks not because, sometimes the hot drinks are not that useful. Sometimes they increase the frequency of cough in some patients. The water is important. The water is much more important because the water, such patients with COVID-19 have got some form of dehydration. And so water is very important to avoid this. And also water can moisture the upper respiratory tract and prevent the virus from introducing itself to penetrating the lower respiratory tract. Water is also a prokinetic drug, so it prevents the reflux. And the reflux esophagitis is one of the main causes of cough and aspiration and respiratory tract problems in patients with COVID. So simple. It's a simple maneuver, but it's very important in COVID patients.
What about people who actually don't drink much water, or they actually have problems drinking water, and they try to drink sodas or juice or anything that would substitute water?
Unfortunately, this is not going to be beneficial because those drinks may potentiate the reflux. Those drinks are not as suitable as water for moisturizing the respiratory tract. Water is crucial, and I encourage all people to drink as much water as they can. They do not have to be thirst to drink. They have to drink regularly, especially in those the summer months with the high temperature and the humidity, and even in winter. This is very important,
Dr. Abdel Hafeez, now, during as well for the first two phases, we're talking about people who have chronic diseases, people who who are diabetic, people who are cancer patients, and all of these people who might be more susceptible to having severe symptoms of COVID-19. Is that still applicable for the fourth wave, for the variants, for the mutations of COVID?
Yeah. Those viruses, unfortunately, usually target the people with low immune response. Just like what you said, the hypertensive patients, diabetic, the cardiac patients, the patients with chronic diseases, whether hepatic or renal, patients receiving chemotherapies due to cancer, patients taking some immunosuppressive drugs like oral corticosteroids, those patients are much more prone and susceptible to the viral infection, whether wave 1, 2, 3, or 4. Because in an immunocompetent patient, an immunocompetent individual can easily get rid of the virus. And as you see the young generations usually experience just like a flu-like manifestations, and within 4 to 5 days they're completely free. You see, for example, the football players, the soccer players, how many soccer players have got COVID infection and no harm yet. It's just some home isolation for a week or two and then they return back to the yard. So as long as you are more immunocompetent, you can just combat the virus without harming your body system. This is not applicable for those patients who are immunocompromised because they have got low T cells and low B cells, B lymphocytes, and so they cannot deal with the virus in the proper way. They give a chance for the virus to penetrate the lower respiratory tract and to penetrate their circulation, affecting many organs inside their bodies. And so long as the virus attacks many organs and becomes a multi-system disease, so the mortality rates becomes higher. So there should be some more special care towards those individuals with immunocompromisation. Those have to be tackled. Those have to be examined regularly. They have to be encouraged to take the medication as long as they just feel the symptoms. They don't have to wait. They have to seek medical advice as earlier as they can. And also this applies for vaccination, because vaccination campaigns should be applied for those people specifically.
Well, a lot of people are saying the senior citizens are the most vulnerable for such a disease, and also you've mentioned that the younger ones, they can actually deal with it for 3 or 4 days, and like a regular cold or flu.
In most cases.
And you've mentioned as well football players and athletes as well. Now, when we talk about younger generations, are we talking about kids who are 7 or 8 or 10 years old? Are we talking about teenagers, people in their 20s and 30s? What is the actual number or age group are we including the youth who are not as susceptible as seniors?
Well, this is a very important question. As far as we know now from our experience in COVID-19, which is approaching 2 years now, for example, here in Egypt, we didn't experience mortality in ages less than 10 years till now throughout all our cases. And this proves that COVID-19 doesn't affect this sector of population. School children and the kids in kindergarten or preliminary schools, they haven't experienced, no physician, no chest physician have faced a case that deserves hospital or ICU admission for such patients. There are some exceptions, but the exceptions are not related to the COVID rather than the original diseases. For example, you can see, for example, a child in the oncology institute, for example, and he's in the terminal stage, and probably he passed away, but from the cancer, not from the COVID. And then when they do a PCR for him, they discovered that there was a COVID, but it's not the cause of this, because there is a very big, we have to differentiate between patients who died from COVID and patients who died with COVID. You see, but the COVID by itself is not a cause of mortality for this sector of population. As the age increases and we reach the teenagers and those the adolescents, there is some form of increased morbidity. Some patients like those may deserve hospital admission. Some patients may develop some forms of pneumonias, but it's very rare symptom, but it happens. But those patients below 10 years, no.
One would imagine that kids wouldn't have, or 10 years or younger, wouldn't have as a developed sort of immune system as older people.
Well, it's a logic question, but you see, It's a balance. It's a balance between the immune system and the less immunity and the hyperimmunity. As I said to you before, in most cases, the problem is mainly towards our hyperimmune response. When we react badly to the virus, stupidly, let's say our body reacts in a stupid way, releasing all the inflammatory mediators and so harming ourselves rather than harming the virus. This doesn't happen in children. You have got an immune system which is a naive system. It reacts slowly, okay? So it can get rid out of the virus within days without harming their bodies. But as long as you get older, your immune system develops some techniques to deal with the surrounding environment, surrounding pathogens. Sometimes in some people, this immune system is not under control. It harms the body. And we have a sector in our, in medicine, generally it's called the autoimmune diseases, like rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, many diseases which are mainly autoimmune due to the hyperimmune system. So this autoimmunity is the main problem in COVID, because by reacting vigorously towards the virus, we face the problems.
Is there a way to train your immune system as not to have a hyper-reactive immune system?
It's related to many issues. Let me tell you that mainly even the psychological factor, because those patients with hyperimmunity are usually psychologically more labile. As long as they get more cool and more having more psychological peace, usually this hyperimmunity comes down. But this is difficult to approach in such form of patients. What we do actually is that in those patients we give immunosuppressive therapy. All of us heard about the use of steroids in COVID-19, the use of dexamethasone, for example, or methylprednisolone. These are forms of steroids. What do those steroids do? In addition to the anti-inflammatory action, they also decrease this hyperimmune response. They suppress it, you know, they suppress the hyperimmunity. So the patient cannot react in that vigorous ways towards the virus. So the use of those immunosuppressive drugs, even the use of plaquenil and the anti-malarials, which were assumed to be of good benefit in the first and second waves, it all acts through these immunosuppressive mechanisms. One of the main drugs that we use in COVID-19, especially in hospitalized and ICU patients, it's called Actemra. It's an anti-interleukin 6. The main key player or the key factor in potentiating the inflammation in COVID-19 is an immune system related to interleukin 6. So by suppressing this interleukin 6, we decrease the cascade of inflammatory action causing problems in COVID-19. So actually, we suppress the hyperimmune response of those patients so as to achieve complete cure. That's what we do.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've known now that Egypt is locally manufacturing 15 million doses of the Sinovac vaccine, and upon the President's directives, now the government has an open budget for fighting the coronavirus pandemic. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
In implementing President Abdel Sisi's directives and guidelines on preserving citizens' health, especially in the face of the coronavirus pandemic, the health sector budget allocations in the current fiscal year 2021-2022 exceed the established constitutional entitlement rate and amount to 275.6 billion Egyptian pounds. Minister of Finance Mohammed Maid stated his ministry stands ready during the actual implementation of the budget to allocate all the additional resources to the health sector in many ways to help strengthen the anti-coronavirus capabilities and provide the necessary funds to complete the procurement of vaccines. The minister sent a reassuring message to citizens saying there is an open budget for the health sector to fight the coronavirus. He said £3 billion have been arranged for the purchase of vaccines since the contract was presented to date. To ensure the immunization of most citizens against the virus, especially given the appearance of the fourth wave in a number of countries and the scientific confirmation of the effectiveness of the vaccines in the face of any mutation in the virus, reducing the health impact and increasing protection of citizens, as well as the close link between the return to the pre-corona economic performance indicators and the expansion of vaccinations. The minister added that given the success of the economic reform program, which has helped enable the government to flexibly deal with the coronavirus crisis, and the provision of a proactive package that includes the following: the Egyptian economy is more solid. the timing that they've helped to mitigate the health and social effects of the pandemic and maintain health stability, as Egypt has been one of the most effective countries in spending aid packages to the economy in the face of the coronavirus. The minister added that all international rating institutions have announced that they will set Egypt's creditworthiness whilst maintaining a stable future outlook at a time when they've downgraded the creditworthiness of or negatively adjusted the future prospects of more than 50% of African and Middle Eastern countries. This reflects ineffectiveness and balance of the Egyptian government's economic and financial policies in recent years.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing our discussion with Dr. Abdel Hafeez. Now, talking about the vaccines, so many stories and so many labels. Sinovac, the Sputnik, the Moderna, the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, the Johnson & Johnson. And everyone has a theory about the vaccine. Some are saying, well, no, this is not as effective, this is stronger, no, you can take 1 shot of this, 2 shots of that, 3 shots of this, booster shots. So what's the real deal? What's the story? I mean, talking about blood clotting that could result from AstraZeneca, I mean, and it's not really a result of AstraZeneca, it's really about the readiness or susceptibility of the actual person or the body to form blood clots. How do we maneuver within all of these vaccines?
Yeah, that's so interesting. You know, the humanity is naive towards this virus, and we are all trying to get our best, whether here in Egypt, in Europe, in USA, in Japan, and China. And I mean, all of us have to do our role in trying to combat this viral infection as much as we can. So there are many trials in many ways to develop the vaccine, and the main problem facing the whole scientists in the whole world to develop the vaccine is that we have to hurry on, because the virus is spreading and we have to stop it. We have to protect our people. Usually, to develop a new vaccine towards a viral disease, whatever the form of the virus, we need not less than 5 years. But the humanity cannot wait for 5 years for the COVID-19. And that's why there are many changes in our policies for developing such a vaccine. Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 trials have to be more near, and we have to do it on a higher form of populations to verify its efficacy. And that's what happened actually, whether in China, Europe, or the USA. Now we're having many vaccines in our markets. I speak worldwide, and then I come back to Egypt.
Yes.
Worldwide, we have many vaccines, but the most popular are in the USA, the Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer and Pfizer vaccine, and Moderna. And in Europe, we have in England and Europe, the AstraZeneca, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and the Sputnik, the Russian one. And in the Far East, we have got Sinovac and Sinopharm from China and many other generics from this vaccine. Each vaccine have got its own theory and its own mechanism of action. But let me sum it up, because we have 3 main mechanisms of action. The first mechanism is to use the classic form of the vaccination when we get the virus either live attenuated or killed and give it to our individuals. That's what China did. They killed the virus and took this killed virus and injected inside our bodies so that it won't harm us, but it can still stimulate, because it have got some protein subunits inside this killed virus, so it can stimulate our immune system to develop immunity towards this virus. That's what Sinovac and Sinopharm do, as simple as this. It's like our vaccines towards measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, all what we used to give to our neonates here, even in Egypt. So it's a very simple theory. There's another.
And you need 3 shots of that.
Usually 2, but now they are introducing a 3rd one to maximize the immunity. They screen the individuals after the 2nd dose, and they measure the IgGs or the immunoglobulins, and then they see whether they need a 3rd dose or not. And we call it a booster dose, the 3rd one, plus or minus, I mean.
Yes.
There is another form of vaccine which is related to what we call a viral vector. we do not inject our population with the virus. We inject them with another virus, completely different virus. And usually in this case, we call it adenovirus. It's some form of respiratory tract viral infection, but it's attenuated adenovirus. And inside this virus, we put some protein subunits from the COVID-19. So the COVID-19 is inside the adenovirus. This is called the viral vector theory. And this is applicable for the AstraZeneca and for the Sputnik and for Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson is in the USA. And the last technique and the most complicated is using what we call mRNA, the messenger RNA. This works on genetic codings inside our nucleus. They take the mRNA of the virus and they use some special techniques to deliver it through our bodies so that we can react to the virus by genetic coding. It's the most complicated, but usually gives the most solid immunity. This is applicable for Pfizer and Moderna.
And all of these don't really necessarily stop you from contracting the COVID-19, but at least it lessens the severity of the symptoms.
Well, it varies.
The symptoms.
It varies from one vaccine to another. For example, Pfizer and Moderna are claiming that they give 90% immunity towards the virus, so the virus cannot catch us. Only 10% of the cases would catch the virus. AstraZeneca is speaking about 85%, Sputnik 75%, the Sinopharm and Sinovac from 50 to 70% from catching the virus. But the point is that all forms of the vaccine would, even if you catch the virus, you get less symptoms. You get less penetration of your lower respiratory tract. And this is uniform for all forms of the vaccines. This is the main issue. Not just avoiding from catching the virus, but the main is that they help you to pass it easily, to catch it for some few days with no problems, with no need for hospitalization, no need for ICU admission. So not overwhelming our health resources, not leading to collapse of our health systems, and not leading to comorbidities on those patients with hypertension, diabetes, or any immunosuppression. Because as long as their respiratory system falls, they have severe cardiovascular and renal effects later on.
Yes.
And so far that they can deal with the virus in a smooth way, it's just like some form of strong flu, nothing more.
Well, the government here has been really working on getting all of these vaccines here in Egypt. We're now manufacturing the Sinovac, and we're getting the Pfizer, we're getting the Moderna, we're getting the AstraZeneca, and quite recently as well, we got over 261,000 doses of the Johnson & Johnson. So let me take a couple of them and focus first on the Pfizer that was actually yesterday been certified by the COVAX and the World Health Organization, having a serious formal backing and certification. The Pfizer in specific. Why the Pfizer?
Well, so far till now, we are having here in Egypt, actually present now, the AstraZeneca in good amount, the Sinovac and Sinopharm, and now the Sputnik. It's here 1 month ago. And the Sputnik and the AstraZeneca, as I said before, they work through the viral vector. The Sinopharm and Sinovac works through the heat-killed virus. So both techniques are suitable and both techniques are okay, and there is a safety profile which is good for both. I'll come back to your question about the AstraZeneca because I didn't answer what you said about the blood clotting. Because some people need some reassurance as regards this point. It's very important. Well, no, it's AstraZeneca have been claimed and blamed that it can cause some blood clots in some susceptible individuals, but this didn't prove to be true. Because when they performed some studies as regarding the patients who took the AstraZeneca and the placebo patients who took some vaccine which doesn't contain any active material, they found out that the two arms are nearly the same. And the frequency of those blood clots is about 17 per million, which is okay for the natural population, even without taking the vaccine. So we do not have a solid evidence that patients receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine will be more susceptible to develop blood clots. And there is no recommendation, whether by AstraZeneca itself or by the WHO, to give anticoagulants, for example, for such patients receiving the vaccine. Up till now, there is no solid evidence for this. And we have many people here in Egypt who took the AstraZeneca and no one experienced such forms of blood clots, except for those who are already susceptible. Even if they didn't take the vaccine, they will develop some blood clots. So this is important. Then back to the Pfizer.
Yes.
Pfizer, as I said to you before, Pfizer and Moderna have come to a new technology. They are working through the mRNA, which is the active part of the virus, which is responsible for all the damage that it causes to the human body. This mRNA, or this messenger RNA, they manufacture the proteins, they change the genetic encodings inside our body towards manufacturing many viral particles, replicates of the virus and proteins, so that they can increase and flourish in our immunity system and harm our bodies and destroy our own systems. Pfizer works in these points. They stop developing this, they get mRNA inside our body so we can react, and so when the virus itself comes to our body, it doesn't cause this replication, stops this replication. That's why I've got the best results throughout all the vaccines, and that's why it's the main vaccine certified by the WHO.
And it would still be able to deal and tackle the mutations and the new variants of the COVID?
Yeah. So far till now, all the mutations are still can be tackled by all forms of the vaccines, even the Delta form and the Epsilon form. Up till now, there is no single evidence that our vaccines that we have right now in our hand doesn't work towards those mutations. Because those mutations, let me tell you and our audiences, that those mutations are still not related to the RNA. They are very small mutations. It doesn't relate to the RNA, but mainly related to the proteinaceous or the protein codes around the virus, the spikes around the virus. So the main genetic code is kept the same. We do not have big shifts or big mutations till now. And those big shifts or mutations are not expected to occur except after longer generations of the virus. So we are having some slight mutations. And as I said before, that those mutations are in favor of humanity, not against, because they decrease the potency of the virus.
So it should be like the regular mutation of the influenza, for instance?
It's like the seasonal influenza, for example. You know, the influenza vaccine should be changed yearly.
Yes.
And for the patients who necessitate or deserve to take the influenza vaccine, they have to take it at September, for example, of each year, because each year there is a change in that. That's like the influenza.
Dr. Abdel Hafeez, now another thing, Egypt got about 261,600 doses of the Johnson & Johnson, which is necessary for traveling certificates, and it's distributed throughout 126 centers. First off, now, are these centers able to issue traveling certificates for if you take the Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah, Johnson & Johnson is a special situation. It differs from the other forms of vaccine because it's a single dose. It's not a double or triple dose. It's just one single dose, and that's why it's used for this documentation for traveling, because you can give your patient one dose, and then he's eligible to travel to anywhere because you have a QR code in your passport that you took the Johnson & Johnson, and this is enough to develop the immune system inside your body, so that you can be approved to travel anywhere, and it's approved in Europe and USA and all countries.
Well, why not the Pfizer then? I mean, if it's officially certified now.
Because the Pfizer needs 2 doses, and those who wants to travel usually are in a hurry up of their issues.
Yes.
They want to travel, and so only 1 dose is Pfizer. You have to give 1.5 months at least between the 2 doses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of talk, a lot of questions that could be asked regarding the coronavirus vaccine, the variants, the pandemic in general, and we are lucky to have a very specialized guest tonight for all of you to answer many of these questions. But unfortunately, That's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Ahmed Hafeez, Professor of the Pulmonology at Cairo University and Head of the Pulmonary Unit at the Manuel Specialized University Hospital. Doctor, it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much. I've been so glad to be with you, Mr.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Night International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.